Hi, I'm Cathy Dimarchos from Solutions to You, and we're based in Australia, but we're global.
Love it. Cathy, what is your secret to a good life?
Oh, actually, really being comfortable to say no and knowing that no is a sentence.
Tell me more.
I think most people are actually afraid to say no because they think that they're going to miss out on something. But the realization is the second that you're able to say no is the moment that you actually give yourself the opportunity for the thing that you're meant to be doing to actually come into your life. And as simple as that may sound, it's really difficult for people to do. But the simplicity is actually what makes it absolutely genius.
What can we do in our lives to make sure that we have the guardrails set up where we know where our no's start, right? How can we build a system that keeps us focused and keeps us on the right road when there's so many things to distract us?
Having that distilled clarity about who you're actually choosing to become. And I think people get caught up in what everybody else is doing rather than actually recognizing, well, hang on a minute, what is it that I actually want to do and what does that actually entail? So in essence, it's actually the pursuit of actually being the better person, and that means actually recognizing what did you do yesterday that you want to do differently today? And that's about you, not about what anybody else is doing. So that's the start of it. And people get stuck. Eric, I was even at an event last night talking about this very thing, and there are some pretty high profile people, but they recognize that you get on a bandwagon and you stay there, and then you actually don't know who you are outside of the thing that you do. And your job is what you do, but it's not who you are.
I find myself thinking that I have more bandwidth than I actually have. And it would appear that yes is directly tied to energy output, right? If I say yes to something, then that thing is going to take a portion of my energy and I sacrifice. It's almost like I have a limited number of cards that I have in my hand. And each of those cards is a yes. I have a limited number of yeses in my life that I can put my cards into. And so, you talked about knowing who you want to be, knowing who you are and what you accomplish. How have you found who that person is in your life? And has that vision for yourself changed often? Did you find it when you were young? How did you find it? How do we make sure to find ourselves better so we know which cards to play, which yeses to say?
So, did I know who I was when I was young? No, but there were certain signs. So ethics, integrity, justice, so social justice. They were actually really important for as long as I can remember. But there were many pinnacle moments. We reach crossroads, and until we recognize that it is a crossroad where we can actually change the trajectory forward, nothing changes. So I think, one of the most recent for me was, I was engaged to do a particular project, and that was actually incredibly successful. So I started another one with the same multinational, and they put a proposition on the table that they'd never been able to achieve before, and that was to hit $1 billion. They were sitting at 700 million, and I said to them, no problem. But, I have one rule, and that is I don't actually want to know what you think isn't working. I need to actually investigate that for myself. And so that meant, I spent 3 weeks on the ground just at grassroots, just absorbing things. And anyway, I came back and I said, here's the strategy. And, we can actually do it, and we can do it in a year. And they went, no. And I said, okay, that is your limitation. You've given me a charter. I've said we could do it. We put a proposition together where the team, the staff would actually, gain an incredible bonus as a result if we actually met that. And of course they agreed because they didn't have the belief. But it was a sizable bonus, and we hit it. And, you know, other than them actually being in shock, of course, they were actually elated. But that defining moment for me was that they weren't actually going to uphold the actual benefit for the staff. I were going to give it to me. I walked. And so, and I, I left that behind it. And I walked to nothing. I had nothing ahead of me. I had no income, no nothing. But that was a moment where, it defined who I actually was. And that came back to ethics. No matter the fact that I actually did do the work, I didn't do it alone. And so it's never actually about serving self, it's actually serving a collective. And that is actually really important to me because nothing on this planet can we actually do alone. And if we continue to actually go down the path of capitalism, of self-serving, and actually, thinking, well, you did the job, you still owed it. It isn't going to actually serve a purpose on a bigger, and, what am I showing others? So, for me, that was a pinnacle moment that actually defined exactly who I was. And that's been the path that I've walked on now, for particularly over the last 5 years, since that point. Yeah.
When you learned that they weren't going to give these bonuses out after a $300 million bump in sales, right? That's okay. Just make sure I had the math right.
Yeah.
Which seems bridge burning behavior to me. It seems very immature. There's no way that the bonuses that were incorporated into that bump in sales couldn't be easily compensated by that bump in sales. It seems ludicrous. But when it first happened and you were told the news, hey, Cathy, actually, like, we're not going to be paying out that bonus. Like, that conversation, where in the boardroom with everybody at that time, how did that go down?
Actually, it wasn't even from the board. It was actually through a third party. There were actually quite a messy, it was through a third party. And so that was actually on the phone, which then actually led to another conversation. I was actually interstate at the time. So it was all done by phone. But I can tell you that that was an instant decision. The second that they actually said there is no going back, that was the decision that I actually made, and then made a phone call to my husband and said, by the way, this is the situation. This was on a Friday. I said, Monday I'm walking in, handing over keys, terminating my agreement and walking, and, I tell you that I was sitting there thinking, well, this is actually life-changing stuff. But, in his typical way, he said to me, you actually know what you're doing. Just do it. And it was the greatest comfort, because I didn't have to explain myself. I mean, we've been married for 30 odd years. I think he knows where my ethics sit, but, still.
Do you ever find yourself sitting down and writing out these non-negotiable core values in your life? Do you find yourself, writing down who Cathy is and checking in with yourself that way? Or do you have any sort of ritual that reaffirms your values and helps you stay with your compass pointed due north?
Have I written them down? Yes, they're actually, all over things that I have written, including my, website and my books. But I always check in with myself, and I mean on every conversation. That checking in isn't just about, my values and my boundaries. It's actually checking in to see what I could have done differently. What did I actually contribute to that situation or to that discussion? And does that actually genuinely align with the values that I have? And that is, respecting of differences. It doesn't mean we have to agree, but I do need to respect that, others actually have a different perspective. And so it's a constant thing, Eric. Like, I mean, constant.
Yeah, I'm. How do you check in? Is it every night you kneel down and pray? You write it on a sticky note? You're just kind of in your head thinking through it? How do you do that?
It's actually not in my head. It's the one thing that I say to all my clients, get out of your head, because logic will always actually make you right. It's actually feeling into it. Whether there's actually been an emotion that's disrupted your flow, your energy, the way that you feel. And so that if there's an unease, you then need to actually resolve what that is. And so the checking in is actually really sitting in a place of gratitude for what you've experienced, but actually unearthing what is that that's actually unsettling. What could I have actually done differently? That's check-in. And it is at every intersection.
You go through a process of an emotional check-in. When and where does that happen? Do you have a ritual spot in your house, a favorite seat that you sit, or is it you can just do it while you're walking?
I can do it anyway.
Was there a time that you remember that you had to learn how to do that, where it didn't come naturally, or have you kind of always had this sense of feeling out, because asking yourself what happened yesterday and what am I going to do about it today is a pretty mature thing that a lot of people don't actually have access to as far as executive functioning. They don't flex that muscle. They just keep living day out the same way. And so where did you get that from? Was it something you were taught as a kid or something you've always had?
I think that what you actually just raised is that attachment to emotion of an outcome, and a lot of the time that's anger, or we're actually trying to, I'm going to say, displace that emotion somewhere else as opposed to within yourself. I think, I had lots of privileges. I'm not saying that I had an easy life, but I had lots of what I would call privileges as a child. I was raised by my grandmother. My father was always ill and my mother worked all the time, but having, I think, the nurture of a grandparent actually gave a really different lens because they have more patience and time, right, as other than what parents do. And just being constantly, in her presence actually showed me how she managed different personalities and relationships. And I think I just absorbed all of that. But I also actually think that back in 2014, 15, I spent some time living with a Maasai in Tanzania. And I actually really remember sitting, with them over a period of 3 weeks, in a really remote area. And you don't have running water, you don't have all of those things. And there was a question that was actually posed to me by one of the warriors. And he was actually sharing with me how he started a foundation, and it was to educate young girls to say no. And it was saying no to being circumcised, saying no to marriages, and saying yes to education. And Eric, I remember sitting there sick to my stomach, thinking, we are actually really in the 21st century, and I understand differences of cultures, but are we really actually in a situation where these things still continue to happen? And, that dichotomy of my head telling me this and my stomach telling me this. And, that was in amongst a whole lot of other things that had actually happened. But his question to me was, and what do I think? And was it something that I could actually help him with? And I said to him, I genuinely understand what you're saying, but I am a middle-aged, white, privileged woman that's going to leave in a few weeks. So my voice will not be able to be here to support anybody, let alone that 6-year-old girl that's going to hear this conversation. This is something that needs to happen within your community by the voices of people who understand your culture, by you championing it, not by me. Of course, I had my thoughts. Of course, I had my own feelings. But it's in those moments where you think, am I going to create, an implosion, a catastrophe, if I give my opinion? I had an opinion. Of course I had an opinion, but that's not the point. And so with each interaction, we have a choice. What are we taking away? What's the lesson? And I think I learned that really early because of my grandmother. We do have an opinion, but it's how we deliver it and who we actually enable and empower to actually ensure that there's success that makes a difference.
Boy, I love that. Thank you for sharing that story with me. What an incredible experience. And so I'm wondering, as we wrap up, because I've had you for quite some time now and you've been great. Other than not sharing your opinion with at that time and letting the community grassroots that and sort it out, right? Very important conversation to have. And other than that company that you helped and walked away from, what was one of the most important no's that you've ever given in your life? And what was one of the most important yeses that you've given in your life?
The most important, well, I'm going to start with the most important yes, was to give myself permission to actually do what others thought was impossible and to not be guided by their limitations whenever I would actually present or offer my global vision for impact. So, that was tough, but it was the greatest gift I gave myself. The other no was actually having really, and I do have very firm boundaries. I've actually said no to, let me see, and 9-figure deals that have been presented to me by people flying in to present these opportunities to me. And the reason why I said no was because it was a transaction. Now, I would have made millions, but I will not take on any project or do any work that is a pure transaction for commercial terms. And so actually saying no has given me a reputation across the world of who I am, I believe. But that was more for me and about showing people that we all have the ability to make a greater impact by considering what we're saying yes to.
I love it. Cathy, where can everyone find you?
My website, solutionstoyou.com.au, or simply on LinkedIn under my name, Cathy Dimarchos.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Eric.
This has been the Pulse Ox podcast. Please, if you found this episode valuable, give us a like on Spotify and share it with a friend.